I'm very thrilled to introduce Dr. Joshua today. Dr. Joshua is an aesthetics doctor in central London, more specifically in Harley Street. And thank you so much for joining this discussion today about selfie dysmorphia.
For having me.
I have to be quite honest with you. I personally have not heard about the term selfie dysmorphia before until very recently. It's not very known. So what actually is selfie dysmorphia?
I think the term was very first coined by a colleague, a good friend of mine, Dr. Esho, back in the Snapchat high days, like 3-4 years ago. It basically stems from looking at our face through filters, through certain angles, with face app, Facetune, all these things. So we get kind of like a warped idea of what we normally should look like. And it's evolved a lot over the last years through an even still increased use of filters and applications to edit our pictures, to Instagram, where a lot of the pictures are pre-edited before they're being posted, whether that's filters or applications, which has created kind of like a new normal of which isn't normal, which is a bit of a veil of what young people think that normal is. So it's very important to increase awareness, which is why I think it's great that you're doing this, to increase awareness that these things we're seeing are edited and they're filtered, and however beautiful they are, they're not normal and they're not what we should be comparing us to, because that can over time lead to other kind of disorders where we are consistently unhappy with who we are or what we look like, or with the smallest little details.
Considering the fact that social media and like modern technologies are somewhat responsible for this mental disorder, if you can call it like that, I was actually not very surprised that selfie dysmorphia was a thing. Like social media has like so many advantages. Like it enables you to communicate more with each other, and it enhances the understanding of the world, but it also is a tool of persuasion and fakery, as you said as well, that can severely influence the lives of people. How can someone actually like tell if they suffer from selfie dysmorphia, given that?
Well, first of all, something I want to pinpoint. I think social media, I think it's a platform. I think it's got a lot of amazing advantages, like you said, but we really have to consider it to be like a platform. Everything goes on there, and it's up to us to analyze that probably a little bit more critically than we're doing right now, which kind of leads us to, how do you know? Usually people don't really know until they're being confronted by a professional, because it's so incredibly common. And at the same time, because you mentioned mental disorder, I don't think it's a mental disorder like, let's say, actual full-blown body dysmorphia is a legitimate mental disorder. I think selfie dysmorphia is more of a misinterpretation of reality, because it's far too common. And I think I would go as far as to say that like even maybe 90% of the population of our age has it to some extent. So it's not really a disorder, it's just a misinterpretation. Like we're analyzing everything that's being thrown at us, which used to be like billboards and TV ads, but now it's even our friends who are edited on Instagram. So we're just misinterpreting that to be the actual real world, when in reality it's not. A couple of like when young people come in and they are starting to show me, like sometimes they will just outright show me edited pictures, Facetune pictures, filtered pictures, which isn't necessarily a problem, because sometimes a certain filter will make your cheekbones pop a little bit more, and then you think, okay, she just wants a little bit more definition of the cheekbone, which doesn't constitute dysmorphia. I mean, just the same way that we're still allowed to, color our hair and do all that. There is a reason these procedures exist. They are right for some people, absolutely. That's not dysmorphia per se. but sometimes there's a very thin line where people take it too far and they either want to do too much, or my biggest red flag is when they're too focused on looking like that actual picture or that actual filter. And it's not necessarily about, oh, I think this picture makes my cheekbones look nice or makes my nose look nice. They actually want to, it's the difference between improving something and actually striving to be something else. Does that make sense?
It does, and I totally agree.
Come in and they'll say like, oh, we took this picture together and put a filter on, and I have this really nice shadow, this really nice contour underneath my cheeks. And that'll be like, okay, I get that. You want a little bit more definition in the cheekbones. Nothing wrong with that. Not dysmorphing at all. But sometimes there will be this feeling of unhappiness, malcontent, of not looking like that picture, just generally. And that's a bit more problematic, I would say.
So I totally agree. And also like we tend to ignore the fact that we don't really know how we look like. We only know ourselves from reflections like mirrors and such things, and also from cameras. And even these reflections can be changed by filters. And there's also a facial treatment called Facetime facelift, which I have not heard before as well, but it's actually a thing. So what does that treatment actually look like?
I think that's it's not really a widely known term. There's one US doctor who coined that term, I think. Because when generally when we're FaceTiming or we're Zooming, we're looking into our laptop camera, which generally isn't the most flattering light, because it's usually just our lighting from in the house, which is top down, and then we're having a camera bottom up, which is pretty much the most unflattering you could possibly do. I mean, there's a reason my camera is right there on the tripod. It's the most unflattering angle. You're going to look much heavier than you are. You know, all of this, the chin is accentuated, jawline definition kind of blends into the neck, so that's gone. We're looking at the heaviest part of the cheeks. It's not a great look to be looking into your webcam. So they kind of aim to improve the lower face with like a neck lift, maybe some liposuction, sometimes even, you know, a cheek or facelift added to that. I mean, I don't think it would be that popular in like Europe, UK. I think the US really reacts to those buzzwords like Zoom facelift, FaceTime facelift, like they're all very marketing oriented. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it is sometimes a little bit of a slippery slope, because they're just trying to find something that anyone can relate to, and then kind of convert that into a marketable procedure. And that's not necessarily unethical. It would only be unethical if that specific procedure would be performed on people that actually wouldn't be good candidates for it, but just because they relate to it, because everyone does. You know, everyone's seen that Zoom camera and thought, "Ooh, ouch." So that doesn't necessarily mean you need a facelift or neck lift or liposuction. So it all depends on how that doctor assesses the patient once they actually come through the door. So that's also, you know, it's not unethical. It's not a marketing technique that I would use, but I wouldn't say it's unethical until, you know, people get convinced to have procedures they shouldn't be having.
Definitely. And I mean, I can somehow relate to this, like FaceTime facelift. I mean, I don't know another word for this, but like seeing you, like seeing yourself.
Everyone will be able to relate to it. That's the marketing genius behind things like that, and behind the selfie dysmorphia, or when it was first coined, I think it was called Snapchat dysmorphia. So many people can relate to it. So if you turn that into a marketing tool, you're going to reach a lot of people. But then again, you know, it's still a medical procedure. There's still medical treatment. So it's very important that there's still, you know, selection and assessments in play, and that we don't just, you know, run everyone through the mill who comes in asking for these procedures.
It's actually scary to see what like modern technologies can do with that and turn it into like a business idea. So have you had any cases on some like media-based cases that came to you and were like, I want to look like this or better on camera or something like that?
Well, my clinic is generally tailored towards very natural results, undetectable results. I don't really get the type of people that say like, oh, make me look like Kylie Jenner or make me look like Bella Hadid. That's not really my audience. Sometimes it'll happen and they'll come in, and it's very important to just have a really serious conversation about the fact that, you know, okay, these women, these models, they are beautiful, but they don't look like we think they look like, because we've never seen them on non-edited pictures. And whenever you do see paparazzi photos, you know, these women look very different. And I think the prime example of that are the Kardashians, like bless them.
Yes.
I don't have anything against them per se, but they are probably the most well-known for editing their bodies and their faces on pictures, so that when you do see them on paparazzi photos, they look practically unrecognizable from their Instagram feeds. And that is a dangerous thing in a way, because there's a lot of young girls who try and model their image after that, and it doesn't even exist in the real world because these women don't even look like that. You know, when you're looking at, let's say, Bella Hadid, she pretty much looks, you know, like, you know, her paparazzi pictures versus her modeling pictures, pretty much spot on. But when you're looking at, like, you know, Khloe Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, Kim Kardashian, they are, you know, there's a very big reality gap there that's being bridged with this technology, you know, these face apps, Facetunes, and Photoshop. And I think it's important to sit these, you know, these young women down and have that chat. And it's something that I do almost on a daily basis. It's just, you know, have to chat about what's real and what's not.
Definitely. And you can also like see, as you said, like those pictures when they were like 14 or 13, like young girls themselves, they're completely different. And now they have like really, really big lips, and you could literally see the change. But especially younger generations, they grow up with that image where they already had the change. So they don't know per se what they looked before. But you talked about like how this also changed the perception of beauty as well. Like people recognize this as, this is what I want to look like, this is for me beautiful. But has that also made like an effect on the general cosmetic surgery industry? Or
100%. Beauty is very much an evolving concept. Every time, you know, there will be new trends and everything. The trend for the last 2 years is high eyebrows. All the eyebrows need to be pointing up to the sky. Whereas if you look back at like Audrey Hepburn, Sophia Loren, and Marilyn Monroe, they all had really quite low eyebrows. It's more about the arch. And then 3-4 years ago, big lips. You know, now it's sort of going out of fashion. We're more going towards the natural looks again, natural lips. 10 years ago, it was all about big butts. You know, Brazilian butt lifts were the biggest thing. Now there's a lot of regret and liposuction in that area, because it's not in anymore. You know, it's disproportionate. It's too much. It doesn't look quite right. The ratios don't add up. Whereas 10 years ago, you know, butts were the bigger the better. So that's why it's very important, especially with surgery, to know that if you're hopping onto a bandwagon, if you're joining a fad, like how far do you want to take it? Because there's a very real reason that in 10 years, when you're still going to be stuck with that result, it may not be, you know, it may not be the right thing anymore. It may not be in vogue anymore. And, you know, you may very well regret it. With fillers, we have that issue a little bit less because it's not permanent and it's reversible. But we still see, you know, procedures being reversed on a daily basis. So it's that, you know, it's a very evolving concept. Like I said, all those high eyebrows, you know, those overly pulled brows, in 2 years, everyone's going to think it looks ridiculous and they're going to want to go back to a more naturally odd curve. It's like when in the late 90s, everyone was plucking their brows to these tiny little stripes. And
Oh,
now
yeah.
we're all looking back at old MySpace pictures thinking, oh my God, I can't believe it looks like that. It's a very evolving concept. So you always have to question, like, how far do you want to stray from natural anatomy? And the only consistent safe answer is you don't really want to stray from natural anatomy. You want to maybe augment it, polish it a little bit, but you don't want to shift away from what is natural, because natural is never going to go out of style. You know, natural undetectable work will be like the Burberry trench coats and the Hermes bags and the, you know, the Chanel bags of you know, it's timeless. Natural undetectable is always going to be beautiful. But as soon as you stray away from that, it might be in for about 2 to 5 years, and then you're going to be out of fashion, and then it's going to look silly.
So dangerous, like considering that if you go with a trend and then you adapt your face or like your body in general to that trend, that it you might not be happy with it all your life, and it's like your happiness is in the main focus. Like that's why people go to treatments and they have an issue and they want to change it. But natural means also individuality, and no one wants to look the same. Like looking the same is boring. So that's what the beauty about being natural is also about. But why are like people not talking about this more, like especially selfie dysmorphia, although it's very common, like no one really grabs onto that. I know for some videos, there's a very big video on Facebook that I saw a couple of years ago. I was very young myself and I was like, wow. And they chose like sketched figures and there's a person seeing ads, like a girl seeing ads, and they were like, oh, big lips, big butt, big like long hair, and then the ads kept on changing and she kept on adapting. But that's literally the only thing I saw about this issue and selfie dysmorphia. Why is that in your opinion?
I mean, it kind of depends on what channels you're on. If you like, let's say if you're on Instagram and you're following a lot of these, you know, ethical cosmetic doctors, you'll hear people speak about it quite a bit, relatively speaking. But if we're going to go for like mainstream media, it's not really a hot, sexy topic to talk about. It's much more, you know, they'll sell much more magazines speculating on who's had what done and comparing before and afters, and, you know, kind of bashing on plastic surgery or fillers in general. That's a lot sexier. It sells more magazines than to talk about selfie dysmorphia and how it's, you know, how our perception of beauty is changing. You know, how filters, which used to be a funny Snapchat fad, have turned into, you know, kind of a dangerous assault on the mental health of young women. It's just not sexy. You know, it doesn't scream headlines. It's not going to want to make someone buy this book. Like, oh, am I being manipulated by filters? People, they don't want to talk about it as much.
I remember when like Snapchat was still trendy. I mean, now no one really uses it anymore, but like all the people posting about this like dog filter, and you can literally see how it evolved from those funny little filters into like smoother skin, slimmer nose, bigger lips. And it's crazy, like just to see this like evolvement in those little like time gap. It has just been a couple of years, but
it went really quick, really fast. And it's funny that you bring up the dog filter, because that's actually the one that started it all. Because what it did is give you like this dog snout type situation.
yes.
Essentially, it covers your nose, which is a feature that a lot of people dislike about themselves. So everyone was posting pictures with these dog filters because it covered their nose and they liked their face more that way. And it was quirky, and it was obviously fake because you had the dog ears and the dog nose and everything. But then they started making filters that actually kind of like slimmed your nose to almost, you know, almost completely airbrushing it off your face. And then that it became more subtle and more subtle and more subtle. And now we're at a stage, if you're going to scroll through your Instagram stories, you'll have a hard time finding, you know, a 20-something-year-old woman posting a story without any filter at all. Like, scroll through stories and see how many you have to go through to find one, before you find one that's not filtered, if you even do. And that's where it's becoming an issue, because the faces that we're seeing for a couple of hours every day, they're all filtered. There is like, it would be the exception to look at a story post on Instagram that's not filtered.
I actually have to be very self-critical with myself, because I am the same. Like, I only post stories on myself with filters because I felt really ugly when I just post it with myself. And it's just, I mean, I know for myself, I shouldn't feel that way, but you know, the moment when you have a filter on and then you take it off, and you know how you were looking before and now how you look in real life, like yourself, it's a huge difference. And it shows like how bad you feel about yourself in some parts of your face.
It's very important that we make that separation, and we don't let that filter, however nice it looks and however fun it is to look at it and look like it, we can't let that seep into our version of reality, because it's not. It's AR, it's augmented reality, it's fake. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's become so overused that it has created this problem. And the best cure is talking about it, and just telling these people, like, look, it's all fun and it looks good, but it's not real. Like, that's not what those girls look like. That's not what you look like. It's not what we should strive to look like. It's, you know, it's fake. It's all a veil.
But what would essentially help to resist that? Would it help to just cut off social media completely?
No, I never believe in, you know, banning or restricting or regulating, because there's gonna, you know, if they do that, there's gonna be another Chinese app tomorrow that does the same thing, and it's gonna swoop in. You cannot keep people from doing what they want to be doing, but we have to open this discussion. You know, we have to talk about it. We have to create education and awareness and tell these people, like, I know this is fun, but it's fake. You know, when that filter comes off, you still have to love yourself. All right, it can't be conditional. You know, it shouldn't be intertwined with your social presence. So you don't have to like step away from social media. You just have to be an educated user. You know, you have to know what you're looking at, and you have to be aware of what you're looking at. And, you know, maybe sometimes post a couple of stories without filters. You know, don't have that constant need to do, you know, filters on everything. Kind of, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's like harder than being sad. I definitely worked personally because I saw that issue. What I did before was I used filters, and because I felt self-conscious, you know, when you have on Instagram, you post filters and it shows like the name of the filter and where it's from and what's it called. I used to screenshot.
One of the best things about it actually is that it does force you to show that, because imagine how much of a toxic environment we would have created if it doesn't even do that. Like, you would constantly be, you know, picking pictures apart, like, is this real or is this not? And it would be far too easy to hide it. So that is actually, I think, one of the best things about filters, is that generally it still shows that you use them. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of these Chinese apps, or Face app, for example, which is a Chinese app, I think, that will do it for you, and then we'll let you post it on your stories so that it doesn't show that you've used the filter, well, whereas you've probably used more filters than anyone else. So that's why I say I think it's the awareness that it's happening is very important, like that we can make the distinction. But then we have to have the conversation as well, like to kind of, because it's not because we know that it's filtered that we understand the gravity of what that does to our image of real life. So just kind of uncovering that, peeling those layers back, that's important.
It's actually so much easier than the Chinese app to perceive that, like to just fake it. All you have to do is literally take a screenshot, crop it down, and then there's no filter. Like Instagram would not, and that's a danger as well, because sometimes it's really, really easy to see a story and see, oh yeah, this is with a filter, I know it, but then you move to the next story and you don't see the name of the filter anymore. And like what it does to your mental health is also like you see that person and you're like, I want to be like them, I want to look like them, and but you're left with yourself. So it's really like a battle between reality and fakery. And yeah, but like
that difference isn't as big for other people as it is to you, because I've seen a lot of, like, I have seen a lot of these girls in real life, like, you know, these Victoria's Secret girls and you know, the actresses and models and everything. And even without all the Photoshop and all the filters and all the face app, they're still just like beautiful girls. They look different than the filters, but they're still beautiful. And that difference from filtered to unfiltered is not that much in like a non-standardist opinion as it is to them. Like if you're gonna show me yourself filtered or unfiltered, to me it'll be a mild difference. To anyone else it'll be a mild difference, but to you it's gonna kind of like blend those little things that were bothering you about yourself that you're focusing on, which are always smaller details than we think in, let's say, 90% of the cases. And I think that's also very important to realize, is that all these tiny little things that bother us, they're not that obvious to other people, but we fret on them much more so over the last 12 months, because we spent, you know, 12 months locked indoors looking at Zoom screens and mirrors. So we've picked apart our face much more than ever before. And all these tiny little you know, irregularities or asymmetries, they're not too bothersome for someone else the way that they are for us.
I totally agree. It's also with like, you see yourself in a different light than from other people. And also like coming back to like those reflections, and you only see yourself in reflections and the cameras. But generally, this has made such a big impact on the generation that up until now. I remember I grew up with a little Nokia phone, like no social media, very bad camera. I was most of the time outside. I wasn't really engaged in any trends. I didn't even know what it was until the age of 14, 15. But now I see, for example, my nephew and my niece, and I'm generally scared. They're both very young. They're 7 and 3. So they engage, like they start to engage much more probably in the future with social media and trends. And there are a lot of 13 years olds on TikTok and all of that. So how do you think, in your opinion, will selfie dysmorphia influence the next generations in the future?
Well, I mean, I don't have anyone that age in my you know, near family or friends, but I think it's very important that we make that part of, you know, our education system. I know there's already a lot of talk about, you know, safety on social media and things like that, and who to talk to and not to talk to, and what to post and not to post, and what's private and what's not. But you know, the next step up from that is, like you said, is we're going to have to talk about what's real and what's not, because a lot of it isn't. And the younger you are, the more impressionable you are, and the more important it is to have that conversation that, you know, this is not real, and that there's nothing wrong with something that's not real. You know, we've always had art, we've always had photo manipulation, we've always had special effects, but we have to be made aware of it. Like, you know, back in the day in action movies, we had to be made aware of the fact that you can't, you know, punch someone in the face 10 times and then they're still going to stand up. And you know, it's kind of like a different version of that, but this is in a way scarier because it reflects more on us, like what we look like and who we are as people, as opposed to, like, let's say, external circumstances, what you can and cannot be in. So I think it's more of a slippery slope to see what's fake and what's not, and that makes it so much more important to educate young children as to like this whole social media, and it's a great platform, but you always have to assume that what you're seeing there isn't real life, like it's not the real world and it's not what people look like, because it's generally polished.
I will most definitely watch out for my nephew and my niece. As soon as they have a smartphone or anything like that, I will be like, this is not real. This is you. This is them. Might be fake, might not be fake, but to understand the difference is the most important thing.
Because I find that when, like I have that, like I said, I have that discussion a lot in clinic. I have that conversation a lot. And I find that people respond very well to it. It's a very comforting, calming thing for these young women to hear from a professional, like, look, it's fine. Like, you look completely normal. You don't need this or that. Like, I've seen those other girls and, you know, they're beautiful, but they don't look like the pictures either. And once they kind of, you know, once that kind of settles in, it really does help. You know, it helps them kind of accept themselves more, appreciate themselves more. Sometimes, you know, they need a little bit of a reminder, but just seeing the difference that that conversation makes from an outsider, from a professional point of view, that just solidifies the idea to me that it is so critically important that we have this conversation as often as possible, as widespread as possible. Which is one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I thought this is a really good kind of way to get this out there. And I hope that a lot of people see it. I hope that a lot of young women will see this and start thinking about it, you know, next time they see their friend looking really nice on Instagram, say, you know, you can be happy for her. But, you know, just know that that's not necessarily what it might look like. And if she turns that way, she'll also have this little bit of a role there, but she might have polished that up for the picture, which is fine. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't there. So accept it on yourself as well.
It's really important that like you joined this interview today, and I was like really, really happy. It also helped me, like just hearing that from a professional, an expert, someone in the industry saying that. It helps me a lot as well. And I hope that the people listening in know that this is reality and we have to accept it. And we have to learn from it and see ourselves as the people we are. So
yeah,
that
we don't have to shun it either. Like, we don't have to stay away from it, or we don't have to start shaming filters or avoiding filters, but we just have to be you know, educated consumers about it. We have to be aware, and we have to just kind of, you know, not overdo it and just be aware of what we're looking at. That's the most important thing.
Understanding this new world of technology, I think, is key. So that is literally the end of the interview. I have other questions answered, and I'm super, super happy that you joined today and took some time. Thank you so much for joining.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a good time. I'm hoping that, you know, I got you the answers you needed.
Yes.
You definitely had the good questions, very, you know, questions that definitely needed asking. And like I said, I hope that a lot of people will see this, because I think it's a very, very important message to be spreading.